Well, we're not going to try to get too deep into these two works, but I do want to hit some of the highlights because they are important. They're important for a couple of reasons. One, set that sort of logical framework that sort of underpins Aristotle's approach to rhetoric, and you need to know some of the basics of that. But also, it is important because you're going to be introduced to some concepts here that I think will be fundamental in terms of understanding the Greek or ancient approach to these kinds of intellectual subjects. And so always bear that sort of in the back of your mind that, hey, I'm dealing with people 2,500 years ago or so, and how did they approach problem solving? How do they approach critical thinking and such? It's quite different sometimes. In the prior analytics, he's really trying to differentiate between induction and deduction. Now, if you don't remember anything from your logic classes in the past on induction and deduction, probably want to go back and brush up on it. But just suffice it to say that induction reasons from particulars to universals. Deductive reasoning reasons from universals to particulars. That's in a nutshell. Okay. So in other words, what induction or inductive reasoning does is it goes out and it observes particular instances of something. Right. I'll observe maybe this giraffe and that giraffe and another giraffe and hundreds of others of giraffes. And I'll make a whole study of giraffes. And what I conclude after studying all these different giraffes is that they all have spots and long necks, right, or some such thing. And so only after observing all the different types of giraffes or all the different giraffes I can find, then that's when I draw the conclusion that, aha, a giraffe is, based on my observations of particular instances of giraffes, a creature with a long neck and spots. Okay, that's just an example for instance. So it doesn't make a conclusion to begin with. It comes to a conclusion after observation. That's induction. It's the basis for our scientific method, right? Now, deductive reasoning begins with a universally received proposition or premise. Okay, it follows what we call a syllogistic format. That is, it has a major premise, a minor premise, and what's called a consequent or conclusion, if you want to use a more modern word than that. So it's something like this: all people are mortal. Sam is a person, therefore Sam is mortal. Major premise: all people are mortal. Now, why is that a major premise? Well, it's because it's the universally received or accepted truth that all deductive reasoning begins with. Now, what if that thing is not true? Well, then you've got a problem, don't you? Okay? But what you're offering here is a universally received truth. That is, that all people are mortal. In other words, everybody dies, right? Nobody is immortal. And so if everybody accepts that everybody is mortal, and the minor premise, Sam over there is a human being, he's therefore a person, then you put the major premise and the minor premise together, and you are logically required to conclude that if Sam is a person and all people die, Sam's going to die. Do you see? So that's why the ancient world really preferred deduction. And so Aristotle's whole logical set of treatises prizes and privileges deductive reasoning over inductive. Now, they both have flaws, right? Inductive reasoning, the flaw is, hey, what if I didn't observe enough instances in order to draw a valid conclusion? That happens a lot, right? The flaw of deductive reasoning is, what if you take something to be universally accepted to be true and it turns out that it's not? Right? What if we find out, no, that's not universally true? We can call it the black swan effect. Prior to the discovery of Australia, so the story goes, all swans in the world were assumed to be white because they all were white in Europe. But you go to Australia, they find the first black swan, and wow, paradigm shift, correct? So both of them have flaws, but in the ancient world, particularly Aristotle, absolutely privileged deductive reasoning. And it is not really until the Enlightenment, we're talking the 1600s here, that inductive reasoning, beginning maybe with Francis Bacon and some of the other, Locke and Newton and these guys, did people begin to say, well, now let's throw off the yoke of deductive reasoning and let's embrace inductive reasoning as an approach to achieving truth as well. So that is just a bit of an aside. You can go back and take a look at that. But Aristotle's going to be all about deduction. for centuries, deductive reasoning dominates the West, okay? So he's trying to differentiate between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning, between examples and signs and enthemes. He's really trying to categorize more of the categorization. In the Topica, he presents us with three basic types of probable truths, and he discusses the use of the topoi associated with each one. Okay, so he says that there are three types of probable truths. There are probable truths of demonstration, and these come from true and primary causes. In other words, these are self-evident, prima facie types of demonstrate. You just demonstrate it and people nod and say, yep, that's true. Now, it's still probable truth because it depends not on mathematics or something external to the individual. It depends on something internal to the individual audience member. But it is demonstrably true to an audience member. You talk to 1,000 people in a big auditorium. You say something that's a demonstration proof. Everybody who's not insane will nod and say, yep, that's true. Okay, because it deals with true and primary things that all human beings assume. Okay, the second is dialectical, and that's from generally accepted opinions. Now, that's not something that's true and primary. That's something that's generally accepted, but not universally accepted. Right? Dialectical is something that has to be reasoned out. You saw a dialectical process, for example, in Plato's dialogues with Socrates. This is something that has to be sort of chewed and discussed, but generally people get around to accepting fairly similar shared notions of things like happiness and justice. Now, the third type of probable truth is even more, I won't say sketchy, but even more difficult to ascertain, and that is contentious probable truths. And those are generated from, those are from opinions and generally appear to be generally accepted. I hate the double there, generally appear to be generally accepted. They are from opinions that people have, and they generally appear to be generally accepted. So think of it as kind of a scale of certainty here, right? Now they're all probable, but even within probable truths, there are those that are more likely to be universally accepted and less likely to be universally accepted. So he just kind of categorizes three different shoe boxes here. Demonstration, boy, you'll get an audience to shake their head up and down real quickly, and those are universally agreed to. Dialectical, most people get around to accepting them once you make the case for them. And then contentious, well, they're based on opinion, and usually most of the people, most of the time, to paraphrase Lincoln, get around to believing that sort of thing. Okay, so it's a scale. It's from one end to the other. But he's trying to. You see what he's trying to do? He's trying to get his arms around this question of probable truths and the types of them. Now he gives examples of koinoi topoi. It's hard to say, which are universal or generic arguments. From greater or lesser, and so on and so forth. And then there are also idioi topoi. Got an extra O in there, sorry. Idioi topoi, and they're specific to a subject. Okay? Now, just to break it down, make it easy for you. In other words, there are stock or generic arguments that can be used no matter what type of subject you're arguing about. I mean, you could be arguing about the budget deficit or health care or gun control or anything like that. And there are some arguments or types of arguments that can be used no matter what the topic is that you're discussing, no matter what the subject matter is that you're discussing, no matter what the political or ethical issue you're discussing. These are koinoi topoi, universal or generic arguments. But then there are some arguments that are specific to a particular type of topic or subject, which would be like the death penalty or gun control. This is the argument you use when you argue the death penalty. This is the argument that you use when you argue gun control. As opposed to, this is an argument you can use whether you're talking about gun control or the death penalty or the trade deficit or what have you. So some are generic in nature. Some are very specific to the subject that you're talking about. Okay? So see what he's trying to do here? That he's laying the groundwork here. Before we start studying rhetoric, he's really trying to lay the intellectual groundwork of saying, what types of reasoning do people do? When I get into the different types of reasoning, what types of types are there? You see? And so he's really trying to get as specific as he can with it.